We have Linda and Doug. Oh, is Doug going to be? No, right? Yeah. Doug and Linda have reviewed the frameworks and provided questions and issues for us, for the OSPI team to respond to. And additionally, we have solicited comments from the public, so that's an additional piece that Linda will be sharing with us. So Linda, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Okay, thank you. So as the chair mentioned, at this meeting the board will be asked to approve 21 course equivalency frameworks. These represent career and technical education courses that also meet math or science graduation requirements. And as you recall at the last meeting, Assistant Superintendent Law, CTE Director Betty Clattenhoff, and Dr. Christine Chadwick, the consultant, presented on the process for developing these frameworks. Since then, the process has been completed. The final frameworks were posted last week on the board meeting materials for this meeting. So Doug Kermit and I have reviewed all the frameworks between us. From our perspective as non-content experts, we found that these frameworks generally appear logically consistent, clearly formatted, and carefully executed. We had some questions that we sent to Kathleen and Betty, and I think that they may address some of them in their presentation. Probably our most substantive questions have to do less with the frameworks themselves than about the implementation. How will teachers gain the knowledge to teach the content outside of their expertise? How will these courses be accepted by higher ed? Will all districts be able to access these and provide the opportunity for their students? But the staff recommendation is to approve these frameworks. The next stages following approval will be critical to the success of the course equivalencies. This is one of my favorite frameworks from my review. I've had a mortgage for many years. I've even refinanced a couple times, and I can tell you that what I know about mortgages is that a lower interest rate is better. And I would really have benefited from taking this course, and I think I probably would have learned algebra better in high school if I had had access to this course. I find some of these frameworks really exciting. I think that this represents a new way of looking at course content. And I think it will be tremendously beneficial to students if implemented well. I'd like to walk you through some of the features of the frameworks. The first page of the frameworks provides a summary of information, the course title, the total framework hours, the equivalency credit, whether it's in math or science, and a summary of the course and the course overview. Also, each first page mentions the total number of the units, and then each of the units generally has a unit summary. Each unit has an area for the performance assessments. These will be developed locally, but most of the frameworks include suggested topics for the performance assessments. Also, leadership alignment, there's a section there. Leadership is a required part of CTE courses. And then each unit includes the industry standards addressed in each of the units. Followed by the Washington State standards for this framework. These are the Common Core State Standards in math. So I want to give you an overview of the board's role in the approval of the frameworks. This is the language in the bill that directed OSPI to develop the frameworks and the state board to approve it. So there in bold it says that office shall submit the list of equivalent CTE courses and their curriculum frameworks to the state board of education for review and an opportunity for public comment and approval. So the public comment was part of the reason why the board was involved. These frameworks have been only available for a week or so, so there wasn't a lot of time for the public to review and comment. So therefore we we solicited some feedback through our survey, which I will get to in a moment. The bill goes on to mention that beginning no later than the 2015-16 school year, a school district board of directors must at minimum grant academic course equivalency in math or science for a high school CTE course from the list of courses approved by the state, but not limited to the courses on the list. And I want to pause here for just a second because I think there is a concern out there that I've heard expressed by districts that these state equivalency frameworks will somehow replace their own locally determined course equivalencies. And I don't think that was the intent of the legislation. I think the intent was to add quality opportunities for students to access credit equivalency, not to limit them. And then as far as the districts being required to implement these courses next year, there was an OSPI request bill to postpone that requirement for a year that didn't move through the legislature. Executive Director Rarick talked to legislative staff who indicated that they did not feel the bill was necessary. They felt that if the equivalencies were not ready and districts would not, if the equivalencies were not ready, districts would not be required to implement something that it was not possible to implement. So realistically, districts are already developing their master schedules and registering students for next year. So unless they're very well positioned already, it would be impossible for many districts to implement these equivalencies next school year. That being said, there are districts, eagerly waiting for approval of these equivalencies because they want to look at it and look at deciding whether it's possible for them and what timeline is possible for them to implement. So this is some preliminary survey summary information. The survey was not closed yet at the time that I needed to put together this presentation. So this is preliminary. The survey is closed now, so there will be a report of the full information from the surveys available to you shortly. The respondents were primarily teachers, but also CTE directors, counselors, principals. The others included a smattering of parents and school board members. They were mostly CTE teachers, but also math and science teachers. In answer to the question, in response to the question, will the courses based on the equivalency frameworks help students meet academic and career goals? The responses were overwhelmingly positive. And here are some selected responses to the question, what are your thoughts about the challenges and benefits of the course equivalency frameworks? I think that first comment there, the challenge is to meet all the standards in the framework, I think that's a critical one. That will be a challenge for some of these frameworks. There again, a lot of these comments I think represent some concerns about the implementation, but I think they're overwhelmingly positive comments about these equivalencies. Here are some more selected comments. These are the key questions that I included in the memo and that Dr. Kernett and I considered as we reviewed these course equivalencies. We did feel that the strongest frameworks were ones that included both industry standards and math or science subject standards. There are some frameworks that only had academic standards. There were things like the applied math courses, the principles of technology courses. These are courses that are taught in an applied way, but it was hard for us to evaluate the frameworks because they only had one set of standards. standard. So it was more difficult to picture the course. I think that overall, from the staff perspective, the answer to all of these questions is yes, and we do recommend approval. So before I turn it over to the OSPI representatives, do you have any questions of me?
This isn't really so much a question as a comment. I spent a lot of time looking at the next generation standard requirements and bases, and then I read through at least a half a dozen to 10 of the frameworks, and they're all very, very sophisticated, well integrated, very well thought out. But my concern is what you voiced first is the implementation, and particularly there are ones that struck me that there are some of the topic areas which are not going to be the common expertise to some of the people that now hold our courses in science and math. And at least in one, I can't remember if it's animal science or one of the ones that I went through just for a strange one, that all the reference materials were standards from the professionals kind of societies that I'm not quite sure, how we're going to ensure that the teachers have the adequate preparation time, because to develop a course based on these, as I said, these were very sophisticated. Having taught at several universities, they were, I thought, approaching, a university standard in terms of the sophistication and the breadth. And what really concerned me was, there's talk about flexibility in here, which makes sense. There's talk about, different approaches, but for most, at least the ones I read, there's not any kind of standard text to be used. As I said, some of them require a lot of sophisticated time in terms of preparing oneself to teach that course. And I have that concern about how that gets done, so we don't end up with courses, and what we do is we shuffle teachers in to try and teach courses where they haven't had adequate time to really develop a capability consistent with the expectations of those frameworks. But going along with your comment, I certainly agree that the frameworks, should be approved because they're solid. But what I'd like to see is something fairly shortly that actually has a strategy for the implementation and the assessment, not in terms of formal testing, but something that at least validates the efficacy of the program going forward. Because I think it could easily develop into something where, as I said, you have a great framework and you have a very hard road to get to the delivery of that framework.
Molly?
Just a clarification, and I think I know the answer to this, but I want to be really rock solid on it. So the legal requirement here is that districts are offering dual credit courses, and that's new, and that many districts already offer dual credit courses, and if they are already offering dual credit courses, they can continue to offer the ones that they're offering. But for districts that don't offer dual credit, they may, if they want, choose one off this list, at least one in math, one in science. Or do all districts have to offer one of these at least?
Okay. First of all, just for clarity purposes, I like to refer to these as course equivalencies, because dual credit often refers specifically to courses that have the college credit. The current requirement, or the previous requirement, or the existing requirement in law that was existing before this bill was enacted, was that there had to be a policy for course equivalency in place. But districts didn't actually have to use that policy. This does make it a requirement to choose at least one math or one science from this list, but it doesn't supplant any existing
So if districts are already offering course equivalencies in math and in science, they must also now, that's what I thought, I'm seeing head shaking. They may continue to offer the course equivalencies that they're currently offering. That's what I thought the answer was, but then I was looking at
course equivalencies already approved would be a huge benefit because they work with multiple districts. And when we visited our skills centers, we heard from many directors that having something like this is going to be hugely beneficial because they don't have to go to 7 districts to have their courses approved.
That is correct. I think a lot of skill centers have done a lot of work already to
Yes.
try and get their districts on board, but I think this will be a benefit to them.
Yes.
And in addition to that, districts who have not yet implemented an equivalent course now can use basically the framework already done. They don't have to go through that incredible work that we are so thankful that OSPI did. But so they can hit the ground running and they don't have to do the backroom work that would have to be done.
Peter, and then I think we'll bring up our.
So, this is all great work. My question deals with this issue of when the districts have to implement this. Look at the language here, it says must grant equivalency no later than this coming school year. Does that mean that they have to be in place or they have to grant it? And I'm wondering if we're going to provide guidance to school districts who are going to ask that very question, recognizing that there was a bill that was unsuccessful to put it off. But we're going to get questions about that, I am certain, of what exactly is required by a district this year.
I think we probably will get those questions, and I can only tell you what we did hear from legislative staff, that since these are being approved